I'm Claire Hakimian, and this is my Extemp submission. The United States, as a worldwide powerhouse, has very little fears. That is, of course, with the exception of nuclear energy. Since its very first inception, our nation has constantly been fearful of it backfiring, holding us back from taking advantage of this incredibly useful resource. In my speech, I will take the position that nuclear energy ultimately supports the safety of people across the world in the long term. So my first point to that is that we have to understand the difference between completely eradicating risk and comparing to the status quo. Now, this argument is twofold. First, it's in the minds that exist in the status quo that operates on fossil fuels. People in the status quo who spend their whole lives working in fossil fuel mines see well-documented safety risks as they enter their older years, as they're more likely to face numerous health risks. And across the nation, drilling, mining, those types of careers are linked directly to human rights violations, even within our own borders. Now let's compare that to nuclear waste. The last nuclear waste-related accident in the United States was before the 21st century, compared to the accidents that essentially happen every day in these fossil fuel plants in the form of future health risks that we're forcing their workers to take on. But let's see the other side of this coin, because this impact extends beyond the plants themselves. Make no mistake, fossil fuels are destroying the planet. The fires burning right now in California that have taken one of my uncle's own home are testament to that. In a world without nuclear energy, our future is clear. It involves a lot more death and a lot more safety risk at that. But if we invest in nuclear energy, if we take that step, we're ultimately lowering our fossil fuel, taking a stab at climate change itself, and investing in safety long term. But I can already hear the arguments that people who stand against nuclear energy are making, that renewables are a better position. Well, second, let me refute those arguments on a couple to prove that nuclear energy is better on a few different platforms. The first is a simple one: space. It's easy to understand. If you've ever seen a windmill farm or a solar panel farm, you understand that it simply takes up a lot of space. And even then, it can't produce enough energy to support a city year-round, because the sun isn't there year-round. The wind doesn't wind all year-round. In comparison, nuclear energy is more reliable because we can run it year-round, and it doesn't require as much space in our cities. And also, in places with wide-scale implementation, the costs of renewables are not lower than the cost of nuclear energy, as nuclear energy actually takes the cake when we compare the amount of energy produced to the amount of energy produced. But lastly, renewable energy and nuclear energy can coexist. They can work together to support our goal of becoming a net neutral nation, of taking our fossil fuels to zero. But the last and most important point I want to make is that innovation is already addressing all the concerns we have related to nuclear energy, and will only continue to do so. So first, one of the biggest issues I hear people say is waste, this idea of nuclear waste. So there's a few options we can use to combat this risk, one being simply burying the waste it produces, although that is often opposed by local populations. But another more exciting opportunity is the one presented by Ed McGinnis, a former Department of Energy employee who created a startup called Curio. Through this startup, nuclear waste goes through a reprocessing facility, which takes it to just 5% of what it started with, which then that 5% only needs to be stored for a couple of hundred of years compared to the tens of thousands required without their startup. The other argument that I always hear is that the cost of nuclear energy is too high. But in South Korea, they saw massive price cuts, making it more affordable than renewables just by the process of learning how to build them over and over again. But just understand that in our status quo, if we continue on the path that we are, we know exactly what will happen. I'd rather take a bet on innovation than accept the guaranteed death sentence that awaits us if we continue down this path we have started today. So join me in proving that we do not fear innovation. We do not fear the future. We embrace it. Join me in choosing nuclear energy for a better future for all.